To our listeners, welcome back to the Sunday Long Read podcast and a new episode of our Behind the Story series. Today we are joined by Patrick Clark from Bloomberg. Patrick, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So you obviously write about a lot of different topics for Bloomberg. You write about hotels, housing, real estate. But today we were talking about one recent story that really, I think, caught my eye, and other Sunday Long Read readers loved this story, which was about Hampton Inn, the chain, and what its success kind of says about the U.S. and how people like to travel. And it was a super interesting piece. I think also as people are traveling, maybe taking their last summer vacations or thinking about Labor Day vacations, they're thinking about where to stay and if they're going to stay at hotels. So I just thought this was a perfect time to have you on to talk about this story. But if you could kind of explain how you found this story, what was the origin, that would be great.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me. It's fun to talk about a story once it's out and over with. I have an editor at Business Week who we were talking about what to do next, and probably about a year ago, and he said, why don't you write a story about a kind of mid-priced hotel brand that lots of our readers will have stayed at. And my first thought was kind of, I thought that I kind of scratched my head at that because one of my assumptions about hotel coverage, at Bloomberg, but I think probably elsewhere too, is that people generally want to read about the hotels they wish they were staying at, and the fanciest kind of over the water bungalows in the Indian Ocean or something, or whatever it is.
I think the thing that really caught my eye about the headline of your story is the idea of American mid, like this kind of accessible luxury and that it's reliable. And this is a chain that a lot of Americans experience. Can you talk about that idea of American mid and what that means?
It was a helpful idea that I got from my editor at some point in the process. And it was a helpful idea to keep in mind. I didn't, sometimes like you don't know what it's like. American mid is a interesting phrase, and it sounds like it sounds like something you want to know more about. It sounds like a compelling idea, and then you have to figure out like what it actually means as, right? Like what meaning do you attach to the idea? The second thing that got me very excited about the story was understanding how much work went into making this experience, which is like it's like a fine experience, right? The idea is they're not trying to be a 5-star luxury hotel. The category they operate in is technically called upper mid-scale, which is like almost the definition of American mid right there. And it's they care a lot about about people having good experiences for sure, but the guest expectations when they walk in the door is not that there will be porters carrying their luggage around and people attending to their every need. It's sort of low fuss and muss.
Yeah, and you mentioned the waffles because I think that is it's interesting that you know in the story that the cost for Hampton Inn to roll out these free waffles and free breakfast is not super high, but the perceived value from someone staying at a hotel where you get a hot free breakfast increases maybe their loyalty to that chain. At what point did you realize that waffles were a pretty big part of this, the free waffles?
I always knew waffles were going to be a part of it. When I first started writing about hotels, this is 6 or 7 years ago, someone put the idea in my head that it's all about free breakfast.
Right.
At the end of the day, and that's true at Hampton Inn, but it can be true at, if you're somebody who's racking up a lot of loyalty points in your work travel and then going to spend them at, Waldorf Astoria, which is Hilton's highest, right? Hilton's sort of most luxurious brand, and you're going to the part of the benefit you often get is free breakfast. People care a lot about it. I certainly do like when I travel with my family, there's nothing worse than taking my kids out for any meal and buying them, 50 or $100 worth of food and then like waiting to see whether they're going to eat it or
Right.
not. And I think that is, some version of that is, if not universal, is widely, held experience. So I did know that waffles were going to be important. I think the waffles are, um, I think if you walk into a Hampton Inn and have breakfast, waffles are in some way kind of central to the experience. And certainly if you talk to people at Hilton, the waffle really does matter a
Hmm.
lot.
Right. A really interesting part of this story, I thought, was when you're talking about the design of the rooms, the classic Hampton Inn or even like a different chain hotel, what the room looks like, because it's kind of this very uniform across every location, kind of personality-less. At least it feels to me. And you talk about how one of these locations, a Hampton Inn location in Hawaii, the owner was thinking that these unique lava rock walls that were already there from a previous hotel would be a selling point. And then Hampton Inn said no, and then made that owner put drywall up over these amazing lava rock walls, which to me seems interesting that you would want that uniformity across every location, even when there's something cooler already there. Do you think that that's why? Why do you think that that is part of um, the business model of a chain hotel? Is it the ability to scale, or what did you find there?
Yeah, it's important to. I think that it's important that people know what they get. I think these companies need to. I think that's what a hotel brand is in some ways to a consumer as much as it's anything, right? Because on some level, many of us are booking on like what is the price, how close is it to the place I want to go, and is is it a loyalty program that means something to me, whatever they are. But the um do I like the waffles or do I want a pancake machine to to make breakfast for me? But but I do think that an important part, talking to Hilton executives, like an important part of the uh, what a brand is consistency, and people have to have high confidence that they're going to get what they are expecting when they walk in. Um, with things that are different, and like this is true across. There's some amount of wiggle room in these contracts. I don't think we wrote much beyond just that. I don't think we got like an answer to why, in this particular case, they had to put drywall up over the walls. But, um, there's some things I think that, I think both in that case and in others, people would tell me that there's some things that they can compromise on and some things that they can't.
Hi, this is Don Van Natta. If you're craving more behind-the-scenes peeks like this one, make sure to subscribe to the Sunday Long Read podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And while you're at it, check out our website. It's sundaylongread.com. You'll find original stories, our true crime newsletter, and of course, our weekly newsletter. You can become a Sunday Long Read member for only $5 a month and get early and exclusive editions of the newsletter.
Right, but it's interesting that maybe we've just become so used to that chain hotel type of nameless, faceless style. It's interesting that some of those design choices, like you're talking about some of the other locations where when you walk in, it says enter happy zone and things like that. Do you think that, yeah, the customer, the person who is staying there likes those things and they like that they know what to expect at each location? Or do you think that of course, on the opposite end of the traveling world, people are wanting to stay at very unique, personalized hotels and properties. Do you think that chains like Hampton Inn are going in that direction, or they know what works for them and it's a different type of traveler that they're after?
So like one part of it is that there's some, these are hotels that are designed to be, they have to be durable, right? They have to be cost effective to build. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to be cheap to build, but whatever it costs to build, they have to then get a return on that investment based on what they can sell the room for, which is attached somehow to what people will pay to stay in a Hampton Inn. And I think it's a there's a at least some tension between durability and design appeal or something. And when you walk into a Hampton, it's funny, like Hampton Inns are, there's actually a fair amount of color in the lobby. Like you sometimes miss the color um, because there's also like a, laminate floor or a beige wall that is like, but, that have to, that are there to make sure that you don't have to rent it, that you can, that the life of all of the materials is a little bit longer because you have to, they want to sell their franchise contracts for as much as possible. And so they have to keep the expenses manageable for the franchisee. Then the other thing that I think is kind of attached to that is that the people who are in charge of the brand, right, which is separate than the people who own the hotels, basically. That's a franchisee, but the people at Hilton who are thinking about the brand are they're not thinking of it as a bland hotel. They're like thinking of it as making it a little bit more appealing would be, how they would put it, right? A little more appealing all the time. And so, if at one day somebody walks into the breakfast area of a Hampton Inn and is like this place looks too much like a cafeteria. Why are all of the chairs like this? And then they're like, okay, let's now study how to make this feel like a warmer space, which is something they did. I think they called it a sea of chairs or a sea of tables. And how do we fix this sea of tables and turn it into something that is more appealing to people? And then they went and came up with seating layouts that are a little bit different. So I don't think that they are, my impression from Hilton people is not that they're trying to create a bland hotel because people like bland hotels. They're trying to, on one hand, make a hotel which is physically durable and can withstand wear and tear in a way that the person who owns the hotel can make money. So that they will then go open the next one and the next one and tell their friends how great it is to run these hotels.
Right.
And so that's like one important idea for the Hilton people. And then the other important, and then within that framework, how do they make their hotel a little more appealing than, the competitor brand? And
Right.
so I think, but again, like this is the interesting thing is like there's a lot of work goes into this. And and they're thoughtful and they're creative but what I find interesting is like they go through all this effort and then they make a hotel where your association of it is like this is this is kind of blah. So that's but it's not, I don't know, it's not intention. They're trying to make warm and appealing places. They've got some constraints.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. If you're thinking about scaling to all of these different locations. And it's also interesting to think that when you go into a hotel, and you get this from reading your story, is that all of these little things are intentional choices that are based on market research that they did. So when in your story, when you're talking about curving the shower rod so that you have more room in the shower, taking the doors off of the closet so that you don't forget that your jacket is in there before you leave, it's very interesting that it's kind of a study of human psychology a little bit that goes into these rooms because you're thinking about what do people do when they go into a hotel room and how can we maximize their experience.
Yeah, I think this is the theory of every company is interesting if you stop and, or every business is interesting if you get to know it. Like when they, and when they told me about or I was walking through a prototype room, and saw the wardrobe that didn't have doors on it. And they said something about either the designer or another brand executive said something about it. Um, I'm not sure if I even totally got it at the time, but when I went back through the notes, I love that one because I, that one is extremely relatable to me. That whenever I hang up something in a hotel closet, I'm sure I'm going to leave it behind. And,
Right.
and the fact that and it's like the fact that they figured it out, that they came to understand that a lot of people had this experience in hotels, and then they came up with a solution for it. Is on the one hand, like I find, on the one hand, it's like amazing. I'm great job, guys. Right. This is so cool that you've had this insight that you can execute. But then at the same time, it's like really like like I could have thought of that.
Right, right. Like you get sucked in. I can imagine when you're reporting this story, you're um, kind of getting sucked into all of these little details, and you're like, "Wow, that is interesting." And then you're like, "But also, it is a closet."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think that's 100% right.
Is it hard to write a story like this? And a lot of your reporting, you're reporting on brands and companies. But with this particular story, is it tough with something that is a positive story for Hampton Inn when you're talking with some of these executives and PR people to try and make sure that your story doesn't come across like a press release for them? How do you walk that line?
I sort of had confidence that um, if it had been, again, a luxury hotel, and it was a story about a luxury hotel brand, and this story was how great the luxury hotel brand
Hmm.
is, then I would, and I might write that story someday, but then you would feel, I think that would be more complicated for me than when you're writing, and I don't, I mean, I never, it's cliche, and I've certainly said this many times to people work at companies that I'm writing about. I've given up on trying to guess how they're going to feel about it. It's very hard to know. Sometimes you think that people are not going to like something, and they do, and vice versa. And so I do think it's not super helpful to spend too much time,
Right.
right, focusing on the subject's reaction. Um, but um, I think the fact that this was a story about a brand that, had um, risen to the top of the hotel world by being good enough, or by being, pretty good, made it easier because we weren't saying that it made it there by being the best thing since,
Right. Yeah.
the do it yourself waffles.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that what kind of pressure does the existence of Airbnb and, you know, ERBO sites like that, what influence does that have on the idea of a hotel chain now? Do you think that it's a different type of person, different type of vacation for someone might book an Airbnb? Like, what is that relationship between when Hampton Inn first started and now the fact that someone could book an Airbnb?
Um, it depends where, I guess. I mean, I don't think it clearly, like, the emergence of Airbnb hasn't uh, prevented the hotel companies from doing well. The big U.S. hotel company, Hilton and Marriott, which is bigger, but um, bigger by a bit, but sort of, the best proxy for Hilton. Their their businesses are performing great. Their stocks are, higher than they've ever been. So that doesn't seem to, it's. I think they're both feeding from uh, like good trends in travel, which is just that people are spending more of their money on experiences instead of products. There's a growing global middle class, and when people ascend into sort of middle class travel. That's like one of the things they do is start traveling. Like emerging countries start building all this travel and infrastructure, and so I don't, I don't really. I think that question is maybe asked a little bit less. Some of the hotel companies have dabbled with, and Marriott is the one that has a larger business operating Airbnbs. I mean, the way they put it might be slightly different, but they have something called Marriott Apartments, and they also have if you want to get a really nice house that's on the Marriott platform, and it you know the perspective is then that you travel for business and you stay in a hotel, and then you get the points, and when you want to have family vacation or a reunion or whatever it is, you use the points to rent a house. They're somewhat different businesses. Hilton CEO used to talk about how Hilton has not dabbled in that and has generally seen home sharing as like more of a budget-minded experience, which I think you can forget as a consumer because maybe you're looking at like an Airbnb that's on a lake somewhere, and it is actually really expensive, or it's a big house. But I think um, I think writ large, like at a I think that at the hotel, like the hotel companies I write about more tend to be a little higher end on than the average Airbnb, although there's obviously lots of nuance in all directions. It doesn't seem like it's been a huge one. When I started covering hotels um, pre-COVID, there was an extended period of time in New York City specifically where uh, it was really hard for hotels to increase rates. And part of the thinking, there were two things going on. One, there was a lot of new hotel development, and two, there were all these Airbnb rooms. Um, New York City has kind of cracked down on both of those things. They've made it very hard to develop new hotels, and they've also put pretty strict limits on Airbnb or short-term rentals more broadly. And I think as a result, I think that's been pretty good for hotels. So like in that way, like it's all part of, in any given market is always part of the lodging demand. And, the more supply, the harder it is to charge more money. That's a long answer to that maybe didn't tell you a
No,
whole
Deb,
lot.
I think that's all super interesting. With all of this, what do you think, Hampton Inn, these hotel chains, what do you think that this means for the kind of classic American family that's traveling? I mean, you saying you traveling with your family, would do you think that this experience at different hotel chains like Hampton Inn is different than decades ago when they first started? What is the experience of the American family traveling now compared to maybe in the past?
One way to answer the question is when Hampton Inn started out, it was closer to an economy hotel chain. They had exterior, they had the setup where the you enter from the parking lot or you walk up the stairs and you enter from the balcony. Um, the Over time, they they again they made it a little better and a little better and a little better until it was a higher end experience. Um, and they have to keep doing that because all these companies are chasing the same consumers using pretty much the same ideas, and most of these ideas are pretty replicable. The And again, I mean, I think most, if you get hotel people to be honest with you, they will mostly tell you that many consumers are going to shop on price and location. So so it's a race, and it's a funny race because you don't want to get so ahead, because it's everything in the hotel industry is like it's like a 3 or 4 way tug of
Right.
war, where anything that Hilton demands franchisees put in their Hampton Inns uh, that comes out of the franchisee's pocket is probably going to be really good for you or me when we stay at a hotel. But and Hilton wants to do enough of that to keep us staying at their hotels, but not so much that the franchisees open other types of
Right.
hotels. But I think it's generally, I mean, I think another way to think of it is as standards of living go up in the United States or another country, it makes sense that the sort of the quality of the middle tier hotel is going to go up. It's just and it might go up a lot, but it still might not knock your socks off when you walk
Right.
into one.
I mean, other than Hampton Inn, obviously you write a lot about, other types of hotels, housing, real estate. It's a pretty broad spectrum of topics that you write about. How do you determine what your next story at any given time will be?
Um, uh, it's mostly opportunistic. I mean, sometimes it comes from somebody outside. So, sometimes it's an editor who says you should look into a story about this. A lot of the times it's the news driving it. I think that I'm a beat reporter, and it's not like I just write magazine articles. The companies that I cover generally don't require. They're not the biggest companies in the world. They don't require, everything they do isn't news that we need to write about, and so that creates some time and space to write stories like this one. But when I'm doing my job best, usually one thing feeds the other, and being on top of the news and breaking news is in the process of doing that. I'm learning about parts of these businesses that they're interesting, and I'm meeting the people who can tell me more about them. And then when I write, then when you write the long stories, you get to spend more time with people at the companies, and you go deeper and you learn more, and it becomes easier to have conversations with people that then help you break news. So I think that's like the goal. It's not always perfect.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. And I think if people end up staying at a Hampton Inn or another hotel chain in the next few weeks and months, it'll be interesting for them to have this story to read and realize what's going into it beyond just walking in. So thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Amanda.
This episode of the Sunday Long Read podcast was produced by Justin Greenawald and me, Amanda Ulrich. The co-founders of the Sunday Long Read newsletter are Jacob Feldman and Don Van Natta Jr. Until next time, thanks for listening.